minutes or so, I would say. And so basically the storm now just exiting Leominster, either in a weakening cycle stage, meaning that it will ramp back up, or in a decaying stage, meaning that it's on its way down. I can tell you right here comes the latest scan. And you see, it's still a storm that still has a very well-defined hook. And you can still see that, right, RD?
I do.
Yeah, and when I see this kind of a hook, this still is not something, trust me, I'll step back onto the map. This is something where I would love to be able to give the all clear on a tornado warning and be able to tell you that I'm not overly concerned any longer. At this point, though, we don't see that as being the case simply because there's still that very well-defined hook. You've still got a spot that clearly is the apex or the center of rotation, RD.
And we've also seen that warning box move as the storm has moved. We started up in Winchendon, moved toward Fitchburg and Leominster, and now we're moving toward Clinton, Marlborough, Framingham. Hudson, I think, is on there as well. There is a chance in the next few minutes that if this thing holds together, we could see that box advance further.
Yeah, and you can probably tell my face is dropping a little here as I talk with you because I'm seeing that this is not done cycling yet. We're still getting a hook echo. We still have a very deep red here. Let me zoom in a little bit more and show you what's happening. So again, if you're just joining us, the tornado warning remains in effect for northern Worcester County for rotation indicated on Doppler radar with this storm. We've had reports that came into our live report from Josh Brogadier in the field of a possible tornado touchdown out in Westminster. Either way, Doppler radar is indicating rotation. And my concern with this is that what we're talking about here, you see the red, this is the overall hook shape. This indicates that with the counterclockwise flow of air, we're wrapping the storm around itself, around a storm center. The concern is this red tongue. We were watching this earlier, and we started to lose it for a radar scan or two. That usually means that your storm is either decaying or in a cycle, and in this case, it's coming back a bit. So I'm afraid that we're still dealing with a cycling storm. Another update coming in here, RD.
And Matt, while you digest that update, why don't we give the website again and the email address if you have pictures. Yes. We'd be interested in your live reports on what you're seeing. Any signs of a touchdown? Still this unconfirmed report of a touchdown.
Yeah, that's right. And really the email address is weather@necn.com. That's the best way to communicate with us. Some of you have my Twitter account at Matt Noyce on Twitter. I've certainly been monitoring that as well. So, you know, you get us the information, weather@necn.com, or you get it to that to the Twitter account, and we will relay it right away. No question about that.
And we'll take photographs as well if you have them.
Yeah, that's, oh, of course, absolutely. And you know, the other part of this, RD, okay, I'm just looking at the latest radar image. You're seeing the reflectivity here on the screen. The velocity, which indicates rotation inside a storm, is still showing what we call gate-to-gate shear. In other words, what we're seeing now is we're seeing really air that's spinning in two different directions right next to itself, and it's doing that right inside of this hook area near Gates Crossing is the name of the neighborhood for those of you who live in that area. So there are still signs, unfortunately, RD. I was really hoping this was the beginning of a weakening trend, but I did tell you it could be a cycle. I think this was a cycle, and we're cycling back up again on the potential rotation. So what that means we need to do now is say, okay, what does that mean down the line? What that means down the line is that the storm continues to follow Route 70, continues to make its way likely across Route 117, and continues to move south and east. What that also means is as the tornado or the apparent tornado on Doppler radar, again, no confirmed reports of a touchdown, but as this continues to move southeast, we may see yet another tornado warning issued, and this time it would be for Hudson, for Maynard, for Marlborough, and right along the 495 to Route 20 corridor. So that's something I just want to put you on guard for because this storm is moving southeast. I can give us the overall storm path again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it from the apex, from the rotation point. Understand that on either side of this storm, you're going to get hail, you're going to get rain, you're going to get lightning, you're going to get wind that may cause damage. But it's along the center of rotation that we're most concerned. Bolton, Massachusetts, the rotation would arrive at about 8:22, Maynard about 8:38, and if this should survive all the way to Framingham, it would be 8:51. RD, there is something more to tell you about storms like this. Essentially, you know, this has been going on a long time now. We're coming up on nearly an hour.
Almost an hour.
Yeah, so we've been watching this storm. That is not atypical necessarily. Tornado touchdowns in New England typically are brief. They typically are relatively weak, F0, F1, sometimes F2. Of course, we saw the tornado in Bridgeport earlier this year. But tornadic storms showing rotation, oftentimes show rotation for for very long periods of time, they become what we call supercells. They take on rotating kind of lives of their own. It's also important to note that while this is a tornadic rotation that we're seeing, many storms rotate in general. Oftentimes, I would say about 60% of the storms that we see in New England rotate. There's a new radar scan, and I don't want to delay in getting it to you. Let's go ahead and zoom back in and show you what's happening here. Let's see, as I'm looking at it now, there is, I suppose, I don't want to say it's good news yet, so I won't jump to that conclusion, but what I'll say is this, that we still have that red tongue here. What I'm going to watch for in the next 2 scans of the radar, which will be about the next 4 to 8 minutes or so, will be to see if this tongue starts to collapse and wrap back in again, because right now, there's still indications that we may have rotation directly over Route 117 or just northeast of South Lancaster. Folks in downtown Clinton, I can tell you that this storm will likely miss you off to the north and east. You know, earlier we were tracking street by street where we thought this thing was heading. The reason that we're not doing quite so much of that is because it had become less defined for a time. I'm fairly certain, though, that we can re-pinpoint this center of rotation now with this latest radar scan. Schufelt Road and Ash Street, 2 locations that pop up underneath this rotation. Again, it is moving south and east, so I want to try and get out ahead of the storm if we can and tell you who we think would be next in the path, because it's one thing to tell you where it is, but what you really need to know is where it's going. And where it looks like it would be going next would be South Meadow Road, Old Shirley Road, Pine Hill Road, and then back in across Route 110 as this storm would continue its southeast motion. So again, that would be northeast of downtown Clinton. It would likely be back up toward the Shirley area as the storm continues to move southeast, just northeast of Route 117 at this point, RD.
And Matt, a couple of questions about these sorts of intense storm cells. Do they feed on themselves, and what impact does terrain have on them?
Okay, great questions both. 2 answers to that. A lot of folks think that you need flat land. I'll answer the terrain question first. A lot of folks think you need flat land to get tornadoes. Not true. A lot of times, keep in mind, this is issued because Doppler radar has indicated rotation. That means there's rotation in a cloud. So if that rotation in the cloud is producing a funnel cloud, let's say that funnel cloud is 1,000 feet off the ground. If you hit a 1,000-foot tall hill, suddenly your funnel cloud becomes a tornado touchdown. So hills, flat land make very little difference. Sometimes they can turn the winds around, but that would be about it.
What about water?
Water, of course, is, I mean, you've got plenty of, you mean the way it would affect a tornado? Or
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
Okay, water has no effect. Water, all it does is it gets sucked up by the tornado, unless, of course, a storm were to move over the ocean. That obviously is not the case here.
Story.
Right. In terms of the wind question, the first part of your question, notice what we have happening here. From Route 2 to Route 495 and then back up to Ayer, there's this long kind of preceding tail. I won't call it a tail. It's in advance of the storm. I guess we'll call it the head of the storm.
It's a rough triangle when you look at it. Ayer at the top and what is that, Clinton or Maynard down at the right-hand side,
That's
Leominster
right.
on the
Now,
other
let me
side.
get out of the way for you. Yeah, exactly. Well, what this is, RD, this is what we call the inflow of the storm. Storm chasers will call it a beaver's tail because it looks like a beaver's tail. This is your inflow of the storm. So essentially what's happening is your rotation is right at that hook echo we've been watching, which is moving south and east, all right? Out ahead of the storm, you're sucking the air in, all the warm and humid air. It's still in the 80s. You're sucking that warmth and humidity right across Route 2. As the warm air rises, it forms a cloud, you get rain, heavy rain. If it rises high enough, you get hail. That's what you get when you see this deep red and this purple that shows up. And then at the center of the storm, where that inflow comes in, you get an exhaust, a downflow. You get a fast wind. We hear about downbursts, macrobursts, microbursts, all damaging sorts of wind. That's still a concern with this storm. Let me zoom in just a little bit and show you what I mean here, RD. Whether or not you have a tornado touchdown, you have to have a point where this inflow that's coming into the storm wraps around and whoosh, comes back out in exhaust. That exhaust can sometimes go 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. And even if it's not spinning at the center, you're still getting a strong straight line wind. And that's still the concern that we have here. And that would match up with some of the reports that we've had from upstream, I'll say, from earlier spots where this storm has hit. Just to give you an update on what's going on here in regard to the location. All right, here's the next scan. And you know when you hear the